First pinball I got was a Gottlieb machine. I used to love playing Gottliebs in the 90s and always felt that they were really underrated. So I went to a show in Birmingham and they had one there, Big Hurt, which I'd never actually seen before, but thought it looked really good, and it was in the style and theme of the Gottliebs that I'd loved playing 5 years or so before. And it was for sale, and it was quite a good price, so I talked to the seller, and it was in Birmingham, and I said, well, I've got no way to transport it back, but I can't believe that he was so good and that he actually drove it back the following day down from Birmingham to Poole. He actually helped lift it up the stairs, set it up, and then he had to go all the way back up north. So I'm forever grateful to that guy for, you know, being so good in selling the machine and delivering it. This one, Medieval Madness, is probably one of my favourites. It's a game I bought in '99, bought from an arcade up in Blackpool, and I can't believe how lucky I was that I got it for 650 quid plus transport cost, and at the time they were going for about 1600. This one has been one of the most valuable games out there, going for sort of 5, 6, 7 grand, but they've actually just made a remake of it, and it's taken a while for them to manufacture them, but they come into the country just very recently. So that might affect the values, but ultimately for me it's more about playing than how much they're all worth. But yeah, that's one of my original ones, sort of back from the late 90s, that I still got, along with Monster Bash, another one of my favourites. These three here, Attack from Mars, Monster Bash, Medieval Madness, are the only 3 Bally Williams, barring one other, that I've got in this room here. I've got 4 machines outside in a log cabin with some of my videos. But yeah, I mean, these are some of, as I say, some of the more popular and more valuable Bally Williams games. But originally, I've only got actually these 2 from where I collected up to about 2003. And then I sort of had a break and the videos were back on my passion. And then we moved to this house late 2006 and converted the garage, and that gave me the opportunity to have more space and get more machines from there. So outside the Bally Williams games, the rest of the ones I've got in here are the newer Stern games, dating probably from, well, Lord of the Rings is 2003, but most of the other ones are newer. Spider-Man 2007 and some are actually quite recent. This one, Spider-Man, I absolutely love. It'd be in my top 5 games. I'm currently doing a few changes to it, in as much that I've put these web side rails on. There's a whole load of modifications that you can get from, mainly from America, but also from other places. And I've got some old legs on. I'm just waiting to try and get the legs that originally came with this one to be chrome shiny to match with it, but I'll see how I get on with that. I'm struggling at the moment, but we'll see. So Star Trek, this is another Steve Ritchie game by Stern, same as Spider-Man, and he's renowned for good flowing games, lots of shots along ramps, and it's a lot quicker pace. And I suppose that type of game I prefer more than some of the more methodical games where Pat Lawler is the traditional designer for those, like Addams Family, Twilight Zone, Roadshow, Funhouse, some of the older games, and I just prefer the flow more. So here we have 3 more fairly new Sterns. AC/DC, this is the premium model where it's got a mini playfield at the bottom underneath. And generally I tend to get, or prefer the Pros, basically because I think A, they flow a bit better, and B, they're obviously a lot cheaper. Just to explain a little bit, Stern now make 3 types of model of pinball. There's the limited edition, which is the real true collector's one. I haven't got any of those, and those are the ones that are real top money, sort of 7,500 plus. Then there's the premium model, which has got exactly the same playfield features as the limited edition, but it might not have a sort of limited edition number, the artwork may be a little bit different. They tend to go for maybe about 1,000 less than the limited edition. And then there's the basic model they call the Pro. Maybe they're trying to make it sound a bit better, but it is the sort of the standard entry model, which is usually what the arcades would have. But sometimes the features actually mean that the machine flows a lot better, in my opinion. So X-Men's a good example of that, whereby this is the Pro, but the limited edition one has a couple of figures that come up in the playfield, a little bit like the trolls on Medieval Madness, and those ones actually mean that it interrupts the flow of the game. Transformers is another game which is very similar to that, in as much that I personally think the Pro plays a lot better than the limited edition. So AC/DC is the only one where I've actually got the higher model, the premium, rather than the Pro, because the Pro doesn't have the swinging bell, it doesn't have the lower playfield, and it's one of the few games where the features that they've taken out for the Pro really do detract. And I was really unsure about AC/DC initially, not so keen on the band, music didn't grab me at all, the look of it didn't particularly initially, but then the flashing LED lights which change colours are really cool, and once you get into the gameplay it's a fantastic game to play. So I ended up persuading myself I needed to get one of those. And then Metallica's another music pin which, again, music-wise, I'm sort of into indie music, rock, but this is a little bit heavier than my taste. But I've grown to like the music, and the machine I think plays fantastically, and it's up there with my top favourite machines these days. I did have a poll recently on one of the forums where I said this was my favourite machine of all time. Now, you know, week to week that may change, but it is one of my favourite ones. And again, it's one where I've done quite a bit of different things to modify it. I do this to most of my machines. I've got flyer key rings, a coloured fob on the key, different colour on the inserts, again powder coated the sides, a different shooter knob, normally that's sort of like a black plastic standard thing. I coloured the apron, flipper rubbers, a little figure there which I actually made out of two separate figures, and there was a guy in America on a forum who had the idea, and I contacted him and he showed me how to do it. And I'm not very sort of DIY orientated or artistic, but I managed to do it in the end, so I was quite pleased with that. And there's a few other bits on here that I've added, some guitars and the coffin with the balls and the guitar pick. So yeah, I'm sort of really happy with that one as well. The first tournament I went to was the European Pinball Championships in Germany in 2006. There was a group of about 12 of us from the UK that went. I did okay, but didn't actually qualify, but I don't think I've probably appreciated the quality of players that were out there, and of course I guess those are the top European players anyway. So a few of us did qualify and they did well, but I didn't do quite so well. But that really, you know, I loved competing, enjoyed the trip, the social side was as good as the pinball as well, and a great opportunity to actually see loads of different games that I hadn't encountered in the past, maybe more some of the older ones from the mid-80s rather than so much the 90s dot matrix games. So loved that. Off the back of that trip, we had an idea about setting up a UK league, but I'll talk about that maybe more a bit later. But we then started up some competitions in the UK, and my first actual win was in 2010, so I had to wait a number of years before I actually won any UK competitions, and that was particularly satisfying, just finally getting a win, because I'd been trying for a bit. I played the UK Cup I think in 2008 and got to the final, beaten Martin on the way, which was quite satisfying, and then had an absolutely abysmal game and thought I'd win probably with the score that the other guy had, but even then I couldn't beat it. So just how things go. I mean, that's one of the joys of pinball, that it's so sort of random, you never quite know what's going to happen. So won that one in 2010 towards the end, and as I say, you know, it was just great to finally get a win. And then the scene has just grown and grown and grown over the last 5 years or so. So back in 2007, where we had about 3 competitions, there's now 15 to 20 every year. And we've also set up the last couple of years what we've called the UK Championship Series, where each of the competitions in the UK counts towards that series, and your best 8 results count towards your final position, and then the top 20 players go into a playoff, which is actually going to be happening next weekend. And it's a really fun format. We've cheated a little bit in as much as we've copied what the Americans do, whereby 20, 19, 18 and 17 placed players play each other in one game. The loser of that drops out, and then player 16 joins in, and then they carry on playing until you finally get down to the last 4. So the person who's qualified first is guaranteed to be in the final. So that's a great position for them. And as I say, that's going to happen this coming weekend at Salisbury, which is ironically the place where I won my first competition. You'll probably see later I've got a number of trophies dotted around, which I'm sort of quite proud of, and I've won now I think 10 UK competitions over the years. Never actually won anything in Europe, although I've been in a couple of finals. But you never know. Part of pinball skill, part of it's luck, part of it's mental, but it's partly the randomness that is so good that you never know who's going to win. And ultimately you'll get the best players towards the end, near the top, but you know, anyone can beat anyone on their day. The guy on the front is one of the Robotron characters, so that was a competition I actually hosted here and won the first one. Maybe home advantage helped a little bit there. And then some of the other ones here are mainly, I guess, league trophies. In the Southwest region, I've won, I think, 3 years, and then I've been second in all the other years. So a reasonable sort of record there, which I'm quite pleased with. This was the first competition I actually won, the Festive Gathering in Salisbury, and again beat the UK #1 in the final, albeit that, again, I might have had a little bit of home advantage because Monster Bash, the game here, I'd loaned for the competition and was lucky that was actually in the final. So knew the game and knew how it played quite well. A couple of others here. This is what we're now doing for the Southwest League, so that was first for last year, the silver trophies rather than glass. What I tend to do is have the first places near the top, and then as you go down there's second and thirds, etc., depending on the size. The UK Pinball Cup, this one here, 2012, well, sorry, that's a 2000, that's Festive Gathering. It looked like the UK Pinball Cup, but I don't know if you want to edit that, because
yeah,
I knocked up a bit there.
Okay.
I can continue a bit. That one was one I was quite proud of, which is second place in the team tournament for the Dutch Pinball Open. So again, being a European competition, there's some really top players there, and to get second in that was quite an achievement with not just myself but a few other people, so it wasn't just down to me, is what I'm trying to say. It was a joint team effort. This one here was winning a side tournament for one of my friends, Dave Mannering, his tournament that was held in Salisbury. And the ones down at the bottom here, these are actually made by the partner of the guy who owns the club in Salisbury, Special When Lit. So they're quite cool that they're all homemade, and you can see that they've got their distinctive design, and a lot of these are for the local league that he holds there, Special When Lit League. And I've never actually made it to first. I've always been challenging the guy who owns it, but he's always just picked me on that. This one, UK Pinball Cup, 2012. I got to the final. This was the third time I got to the final. It was third time lucky for me, because I'd lost twice, and it was it was odd because I got to the final 2008, 2010, and it's like every other year I'd get to the final, and then this year I won and I beat the guy from Salisbury, Peter, in the final, so that was enjoyable as well. I mentioned earlier on, I think, my first trip away, the European Championships in Germany. On the way there and back on the plane, we were talking about the idea of trying to get more competitive pinball in the UK, and had the idea of having a UK league. And there's a guy who was on the trip, Eddie Mole, who really made it happen, and he did a fantastic job in setting it up. So we had different regions across the country: the southwest, London and the southeast, Midlands and northern regions. And what we did is then hold meets in people's houses, and we tended to have about 6 per year, and then your best 4 of those meets count towards the overall result. And we then, at the end of the year, it tended to be in the summer at the show that I mentioned earlier, the UK show, in whatever form it happened to be at the time, we would have a playoff for the top 3 or 4 players from each of the regions as the UK League final. So, as I said earlier, the number of competitions has grown immensely over the years, but initially we had the UK Open, the UK Cup and the League as the 3 major competitions. So when we set up the UK League, I actually started off as coordinator, as we termed the role, of the Southwest region. I did that for a couple of years, and then Eddie stepped down as UK League coordinator overall, and I took that over, and I'm still doing that now, sort of 10 years down the line, I guess, because we're in our 10th season now, and we've had a couple of meets so far around the different regions. But it's a great way for people to, I suppose it's more an excuse to socialise to some extent. Yes, there's some people who take it quite seriously and very competitive, but a lot of people come along just for an afternoon's pinball, chance to play a whole load of different games, meet other people who are interested in pinball. It's quite cheap, and there's usually somewhere which isn't too far away from most people because the venues are dotted about the country. So, as I say, it's a great way to get to know more people who are into pinball. I've been playing competitive pinball probably for the best part of 10 years now, and as I said, the number of competitions has increased considerably over the years, and we've now got 15 to 20 competitions in the UK. And also it's expanded in Europe and across the world. So in Europe there's competitions sort of almost, well, I guess there's probably one every week if you were that keen, but there's a group of us who tend to go to sort of 4 or 5 competitions in Europe every year. And there's also a European Championship series like there is for the UK, and I suppose we partly did ours on the back of the European one. And again, there's a playoff for that in a month's time or so, and I've done really well the last year, so I'm actually 15th in that, which I think is just incredible and better than probably I think I ought to be, but I'm not going to say no. That's the end.